Hey everyone, welcome to the part 2 of the actual images Signal Culture app tutorial. Now, in the first part, if you didn't watch that, we went over how the video rate oscillator, phase modulation oscillator, and frequency modulation oscillator work. It's a mouthful, right? But we also kind of went over like what rates those work in and all the kind of possibilities that are possible within. Building upon that information, I want to explain a couple more things that are in the app. First off, you may notice that there's a difference between canvas size and window size. The canvas size is what you want to pass through. Now, you may have different resolutions of videos coming in. So what do you want the whole thing, if you were to send this out to, let's say, the Siphon recorder, or you want to send it to another app, what resolution is a medium that you want all of it to pass through as? That's not the same as window. Window size, as you can see here, I have a 720p window. That's just the floating window. You can full screen and the window size doesn't matter, but if you just want to be able to look at things and you don't want that window to take up too much of the screen, or you want to be a little bit bigger on the screen, the window size is what you're just visualizing is right now. The canvas is what it sends out as. So why is this important? Well, notice in the input amplifier, I have my video, right, that you see right now, and 3 other videos. They're different resolutions. The 3 recorded videos are all 4K, and my video is 1920 by 1080. And I don't necessarily need to pass through a 4K signal, and so this essentially will combine them, but it'll put it within a 1920 by 1080 canvas. If you want to have it at 4K, you can do that. And you can even include things that are lower res, and it will up res it into that. Now, typically, you would want, in most situations, to keep a consistent resolution, but I'm just showing as an example of how this works as a canvas. Okay, so not exciting, but it's actually very, very useful. So as we talked about, we have differences of like the different channels coming in and number of channels, but there's something under this called buffer party. What is buffer party? Well, buffer party cancels out channels 2, 3, and 4 and creates buffered videos based on what's coming in on channel 1. Okay. And what that means is its default is 10. So when a buffer party is set to 10, it means if you're sequencing 4 different videos, the second video will be the same as the first, but 10 frames delayed. The third video would be 15 frames delayed. The fourth video would be 20 frames delayed. And if you increase the amount of buffer party, it will always have that kind of spread. So if you put it at 100 frames, it'd be 100, 200, 300, etc., etc., etc. Now, buffer party also runs on the amount of channels that you have set. So if it's only 2, it'll just be 1 and then the other one. So what does that mean? Well, let's bring our manual frequency again back up to 240. And we can see all the videos here, right? I did that on the video rate oscillator. And if I choose buffer party instead, oh, there's this really weird effect where it's buffers of my video as such. Now, if I increase the rate, if I say 100, it's actually going to take some time. It'll freeze because it takes time for the delay to kind of come up and to happen. And now, if I start to move around and do stuff, right, notice that it's all really quite offset. And all this buffer partying that's happening is all, again, based on the frequencies that we start to put in. And that gets really fun really quick, especially if we start doing some phase modulation with it. Let's put the phase modulation to vertical frequencies here. Right? And start playing around with all that. You get some really quite strange territories where it's really kind of playing off on itself in ways that I think are really fun and interesting. Let's even lock that. Woo! I mean, it's fun right now to see yourself doing that, but as you can imagine, a buffer party, if you don't want to sequence between different images, but you still want this idea of things in the past, and you want to be able to shape what that looks like, we can actually get really dynamic shapes working amongst all of them when you start to oscillate in different ways. Okay. So a lot of different types of things can happen. Now, I'm not going to go through all the ways because honestly, uh, the amount that you buffer party against all the stuff we learned in the first tutorial with all the oscillations can be quite a lot to explore, and there's no way we can do every single exploration here. Just know that if you want to buffer one video and play with the different segments, the kind of the ways that we did with the 4 videos before, you can do so with buffer party and have some pretty interesting delay effects. Okay. All right, let's bring everything back down to one channel for now. The reason why we're only doing one channel right now is that we're now going to look at a completely new section, and that's called the optical flow engine. What is optical flow? Optical flow is a way to kind of determine how what is the directionality of a video in any of the dimensions that is happening. And in this case, we're using the optical flow to determine, well, where do kind of these Jacobi iterations, right, start to swirl in relationship to where movement is happening. Now, that's a lot of really precise terminology. What does it look like? Well, the first things first is that if we bring flow in, as I bring it in, you'll see, right, this is a crossfade into the flow engine that's working, right? It's a crossfade between myself and what looks to be like a particle system. If I were to bring this in all the way, you can see the representational part of me down here at the bottom, and you can see how the movements that I do are flowing out. Now, this is the default state, right? And there's a lot of ways to work with it. First and foremost, we don't just have to have this black image with only these things. We can actually not only crossfade it down, but if you wanted to incorporate it more, there's a keyer. Now, the key tolerance as you bring this up will, it's not your traditional keyer. This is what's called a key clip keyer. But it's allowing certain areas of edges to kind of come in. And so as I bring this up, I'm kind of getting rid of more and more of the black areas and kind of clipping in the, bringing in more whites from that black clip. And similarly, if I switch to that white, we see that there's more black areas from which this is happening. And this kind of integrates that optical flow a little bit more. You can soften that a bit, so if you don't want those hard edges as much, but still have this kind of like rather severe type of look, that can be a part of it. So what else can you do with this? Well, we have flow intensity and flow gain. Those are the first couple things I would suggest you play with. Flow gain is, well, how opaque is it, right? Or how much gain is there? If I put the flow gain up, notice that it's actually a lot more present than it was if I bring it way, way, way down where it's barely a whisper. Okay. So if I put flow gain up quite a bit, we can actually see how that's working in that way. And intensity is, well, how much it's going to push in any one direction. So if I bring the flow intensity down quite a bit, it almost looks like edge detection at that point, right? It's barely there as it fades out. If I bring intensity up way high, it almost becomes like little smoke particles, right? And that's because it's just really excitable. But this changes quite a bit depending on where the flow is going. So if I were to bring the flow intensity back to normal and I bring up horizontal flow all the way, notice that any little movement is pushing those pixels in that direction, but not so much in the vertical, but mostly in the horizontal. If I bring vertical down, you almost see no vertical flow at all. Similarly, if I bring vertical flow up, notice it's mostly going to be in those pixels. And if I bring both up, well, it becomes almost like impossible, right? And remember with flow intensity, right? If I bring flow intensity down, it barely moves with it. But if I bring flow intensity up all the way here, with the vertical and horizontal flow, it really gets quite a bit going. Okay. And so, yeah, you can see how all those things kind of work in relationship to one another. When the flow intensity is really, really high, it's so excitable, it doesn't really do the directionality as much. So bringing it down just a little bit will kind of, or finding your nice in between can be, And really what I'm demonstrating here by having it work like this, notice as I'm doing this, it's really activating. If you have too much going on in your image, it's going to just smash all over the place. Now, there's also a swirl amount, which is how swirly it gets. Notice that the swirl amount is actually making it kind of feedback in multiple ways and almost intensifies all that. If I bring that way down, it barely swirls. So all these things are kind of a way you have to really work with it in really particular ways. Now, the flow saturation, if you want this to be more black and white, right? And I bring the flow in all the way, bring my key tolerance. Notice that we have a complete desaturated kind of black and white look, or desaturated look, or medium saturated, or full saturation. Okay. And it's just going to work with it in that kind of way. There is one more thing down here. It's called subcarrier saturation. That has to do with the video rate oscillator. And the reason I put it in this category as well, this is going to be kind of fun. There are ways to do your color party along with optical flow. And this is a little tip that I'm going to show you here. I'm going to bring my video rate oscillator back up to color party. I can't believe I'm calling it color party rates, but 357.9545. So now that I set it at color party rates, now it's cycling through that, and we have this in there as well. And if I just kind of like slightly offset it, right, get that kind of color party, and that might be a lot for a lot of you, but you know, that can be a lot of fun. And then we can even bring in our phase modulation and kind of get more color parties, etc. So you can see where the optical flow can be really quite nice. Now know that the optical flow is going to react to movement in really different ways. It's reacting okay right now. But if I were to start to move this upwards, right, notice that it's really activating in that color party thing against the rolling phase of these oscillators. So if this goes really, really quite fast, you know, you'll get perhaps maybe effects that you really like. But if your flow intensity is up too much, right, you'll actually start to lose the image. Now that might be interesting to you, but just know that, again, it's this kind of like reaction against whatever the frequency of that thing is. And if I really start to play here, you'll find opportunities within that, but it's still, you know, you can get really lost. So bringing your flow intensity down will help you kind of resolve some of those issues, right? And you can still get that optical flow, but it's going to respond to that movement, so you have to work accordingly. Now notice that there is one more thing I didn't mention before, and that's what's called flow dimensions. Okay, and flow dimensions is, well, how much resolution do you want each of these little pixels to be? So if I put it at 322/40, notice it's much more of a kind of a downsampled look. But that's actually kind of okay because you get a very, very different look. If I then choose 720/480, it's slightly more resolved. Know that when it's being resolved in these ways, it's the lower dimensions obviously are going to be less taxing on your computer. You have to make that judgment for yourself how much work you want your computer to do when working with these. If I bring this up to 1920/1080, my computer can handle right now, but it's still lagging a little bit because this is a pretty hefty amount of things it's doing. Now, if I were to bring this all the way up to 4K, notice that everything starts to drag. Now you may like this slow motion feel, but just know that, you know, let's like bring these down to like 0 so we can really see how stuff is working, right? It's kind of a cool look, but you just have to be okay with the fact that, like, hey, when you're rendering these things at these very careful levels, your computer is going to be really limited by it. And some computers just may not be able to handle it. This may crash it. So 4K is available for people who can do it right now, but this is also future-proofing it. In the next few years, the computers are going to get better and better, and maybe this will resolve faster. But it's also an interesting option for you to play with if you like that kind of thing. So, all in all, the actual Images app does a lot of really interesting things. It's really open to user choices in ways I think are pretty unprecedented for most of our apps. And, I hope that these tutorials were informative. Uh, we're hoping to put more of these oscillators into some of our other apps you know, uh, thank you to Dave Fidel for coming up with a great name, Actual Images. If you get the joke, maybe, hopefully you do. That I think that was a fun one. I also want to thank specifically Kevin Cripper, whose programming acumen has been a huge influence on how I was able to think about even pulling some of this off. So thank you, Kevin, and Kevin's suite called vSynth would be a great way to actually incorporate into the Signal Culture apps. So think about how to send stuff from our apps into vSynth, which is a Maximus P package. It's one of the best things that's out there. Also, really, really special thanks to Dave Jones from Dave Jones Design. Dave is one of the best to have ever done it. And without Dave's really, really, really careful attention to detail, sending me documentation on how this could even work, that I'm forever indebted. And we all are. I mean, if you into video synthesis, Dave Jones is a legend. So thank you again, Dave. And thanks to Andrew Benson, whose work on optical flow algorithms made this also possible. So Andrew Benson, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, and it's really important to recognize the people who've done the good work. And thank all of you for supporting Signal Culture and for donating for these apps. Remember, all these apps that you donate for go towards the nonprofit organization, and that keeps residencies free for anyone who applies or attends the residency. And remember, this is a tax-deductible donation, so if you want to donate more, we have a lot of different things on offer, including many, many more apps. And having this app using Siphon Out to go to those apps is really fantastic. Check our other tutorials out to see more examples of what the other apps can do, and share your stuff with us. So thanks again for your time, and we'll see you in the next one.